It all begins in a landscape of chaos and destruction caused by constant terrorism across the entire world. Ever since people started awakening special powers, humanity has been living under the constant threat of devastating attacks. Since not even government forces could put an end to this crime wave, people without powers decided to hire private bodyguards. And it is exactly in the midst of all these security professionals that a true legend emerges among all of them. There was a relentless bodyguard who became known worldwide as the strongest of all. This legendary and extremely mysterious protector goes by the name of Ryushin. He has already protected several wealthy individuals and important people around the world, holding the reputation of never having failed a single escort mission. To give you an idea of his skill, his incredible client protection success rate reached the mark of 248%. And the secret behind all this absurd efficiency begins to be revealed during the preparation for a new and dangerous mission. The Class C terrorist named Hayur shows the poster of their next target, a famous singer named Ri, whom they plan to eliminate during a show 3 days from now. Another criminal named Hesk calmly smokes his cigar and mocks the situation, commenting that taking out a simple singer will be a very easy job. Hayur starts to share details about the girl's solo career and body, but Hesk interrupts him angrily, saying he does not care one bit about any of that. Hesk questions why he would need to know the measurements of a woman who is about to be taken out, while Hayur insists that it is crucial information his partner does not understand. The mood shifts when Hayur gets serious and warns that there is only one major problem in executing this plan, leaving his partner curious about what it could be. He reveals that the real problem is that the singer's personal bodyguard is none other than the feared Ryushin. Upon hearing that name, Hesk changes his expression immediately and confesses that he has already heard many frightening rumors regarding this man. When questioned if he has ever met him in person, Hayur denies it and asks what kind of power the opponent has. Initiating the revelation of the rumors, he says with a focused look that they say the young man can perfectly control any type of weapon that exists on the planet. Hesk becomes thoughtful upon hearing about the ability to master all weapons, while his partner admits that he does not know the details of how it works either. Suddenly, a mysterious female voice emerges, mocking the conversation and calling both criminals cowards. She appears from behind and says that, at the end of the day, that highly spoken of man is nothing more than a simple, ordinary bodyguard. This girl is Nader, an extremely dangerous Class A terrorist who sees these protectors as mere meat shields for their clients. She laughs at the rumor about mastering all weapons, noting that it would be impossible for any normal human being to carry that much heavy equipment around. The villain states with disdain that she is going to send both the singer and the protector straight to the underworld, but the wall of the place suddenly begins to crack. Without any warning, a thunderous explosion occurs and completely destroys the wall of the room where the terrorists were gathered. A huge curtain of smoke and dust spreads through the destroyed room, causing all the criminals to start coughing heavily. Totally startled and not understanding what just happened there, Nader and her allies try to look through the breach opened in the wall. They stand up quickly amidst the rubble and try to see who was responsible for causing all that sudden destruction. It is at this moment that Nader's eyes widen in pure shock as she focuses on a mysterious silhouette emerging in the middle of the dust, revealing himself before the startled group. The imposing figure of a man wearing a black suit appears walking calmly through the wreckage. That man, with an extremely cold and intimidating gaze, is none other than the bodyguard Ryushin himself. The criminals fall into despair as the young man slowly advances toward them, demonstrating the true reason he is called the strongest. The great secret behind his unbelievable strength lies in his unique and quite peculiar protection philosophy. While one of the terrorists screams, asking who on earth he is, Ryushin just tosses his metallic briefcase into the air with all the calm in the world. In mid-air, the briefcase begins to glow intensely and disassemble, changing shape to adapt to the combat that is about to begin. The equipment transforms into a giant electric hammer, because his motto is to ensure that danger never gets close to the one he must protect. With a single devastating move, he attacks the group and hurls all the enemies away without giving them the slightest chance to react or defend themselves. Ryushin's philosophy simply consists of eliminating all threats completely before the danger toward his client can even begin. It is exactly in this highly aggressive and relentless way that he defines his true work as a bodyguard fallen on the ground and spitting blood. Nader says that this can only be a joke and that he is nothing like a protector. She adds by saying that he is clearly just a merciless hunter, while the young man calmly walks back. Without giving a care about the defeated villain's words, Ryushin holds his briefcase as it returns to its normal state, floating right into his hand. He coldly announces that the target has been neutralized, and his protection success rate officially rises to 249%. And it was by utilizing this highly brutal method of preventive protection that the young man continued working masterfully in the security business. The scene shifts to the highly anticipated idol show, where an immense crowd waves blue light sticks in an arena completely packed with fans. While the audience screams with excitement, a voice on the communication radio greets Ryushin and wishes him a good night at work. In another location, a mysterious girl wearing traditional sandals and holding a red staff appears surrounded by her henchmen. The bodyguard is seen sitting on the ground of a dark alley, staring up at this new group of enemies blocking his path. The young green-haired girl with horns formally introduces herself as Neo, revealing that she is a department head of the tragedy organization. Right after, the system indicates that she is a highly dangerous Class S terrorist. Setting the stage for an inevitable confrontation, Ryushin murmurs seriously about the complicated situation he finds himself in at that moment. Ryushin laments that he still has a long way to go for not having eliminated all the intruders, but Neo asks him not to be so hard on himself. She reveals that the true objective of their invasion is not the idol, but rather to capture or face the bodyguard himself. Surprised at being the target, the young man asks the reason for this, but Neo interrupts him saying she wishes to ask a question first. With a curious look, she questions why he insists on protecting his clients in such an extreme and violent manner. Ryushin reflects in silence on what she meant by mentioning his peculiar method of work. He remembers when he had just joined the security company and received the mission to protect a group of rookie idols. The big dream of those naive girls was simply to make the entire world hear their songs. They were about to go on stage for the very first performance of their careers. Since it was also Ryushin's first mission, he swore to himself that he would protect them with all his might. However, even knowing the location and identity of the enemies, his boss somehow insisted on just waiting for them to attack first. Unsure about the passive strategy, the young bodyguard questions his superior if that is really the right thing to do. He asks if it wouldn't be much better to raid the hideout and attack right away, but the boss just lets out a mocking laugh. She calls him an idiot and asks if he wants to become a hitman, reminding him that their job is only to protect and nothing more. The woman orders the rookie to stop trying to lecture his superior and leave everything under her responsibility. Unfortunately, because they chose to wait passively for the enemy attack, the worst ended up happening in a tragic way. Ryushin witnessed a desperate Rie holding the lifeless body of one of her group mates. The other members of the group were also brutally taken down, lying fallen on the cold floor. Rie cried heavily, seeing that all her dear friends had been lost in that terrible attack, consumed by guilt and regret. The young bodyguard could only apologize in the midst of despair. He kept asking for forgiveness repeatedly under the moonlight of that night that marked his life forever. Sometime after the incident, the young man appears devastated and lonely, sitting in the hallway. His boss approaches and asks why he is so down, hearing from him that he failed miserably in protecting them. Ryushin laments messing everything up right on his first job, but the boss questions what he means by having failed. She asks what he is talking about, coldly stating that the mission was a success because they managed to save the primary client. The young man is confused, but she explains that those other girls were just rookies with no money to hire private security. The boss reveals that the members only pooled all the savings they had to help pay for the service. The amount collected by them was enough to hire protection for only a single person, who in this case was Rie. Therefore, since the person who actually paid for the contract was saved, the agency considers that the mission was successfully accomplished. She coldly turns her back and tells the young man to stop complaining and lamenting what happened once and for all. Since that fateful day, the prota's life completely changed direction. He began to live his days in an empty and aimless way, wandering the streets as if he were just a soulless shell. However, something unexpected caught his attention in the middle of that melancholy and lifeless routine. He spotted Rie singing and playing the guitar in the middle of the street for the few people passing by the location. The young man was shocked to realize that, even after going through that terrible tragedy, she still remained standing there. The girl simply refused to give up on her musical career and her big dream. To honor the memory of her lost friends, she kept pushing herself to the limit day after day without stopping. Upon observing that unyielding determination from the singer, the young man finally found his own purpose in life. He swore he would do everything to ensure that a cruel tragedy like that would never happen to anyone else again. At that moment, he promised himself that he would personally eliminate any threat that dared to rise before him. Neo finds the story very moving and mocks him, commenting that now she understands the reason he acts in such a radical way regarding protection. Losing his patience, he demands to know what she really wants there, since she obviously didn't come to watch the show. The young man questions if she is part of the famous tragedy, which is known worldwide as a giant terrorism enterprise. Neo confirms with total nonchalance that yes, she really belongs to this dangerous criminal organization. She calmly explains that everyone there came acting as the official representatives of that group. Next, she extends her hand toward the bodyguard and warns that she has a very tempting business proposal for him. Ryushin becomes quite suspicious of that attitude and questions what kind of proposal a criminal would have for him. The villain proposes that if he allies with their group, they will leave Ri alone once and for all, as long as he stops hunting them. She reminds him that it is impossible to eliminate all threats in the world, because even if he succeeded, new dangers would emerge right after. Finally, she argues that it would be much smarter on his part to work together with those he can at least try to peacefully negotiate with. Neo waits anxiously with her hand extended, hoping that the bodyguard accepts the deal once and for all. Ryushin looks deep into her eyes and asks if she has ever heard a very well-known popular saying. He firmly rejects the alliance proposal, saying that we never negotiate with criminals under any circumstance. Disappointed and out of patience with his heroic response, Neo steps back, grumbling that the young man is a complete idiot. She gives the cold order for her entire gang to attack him immediately and finish him off once and for all. However, Neo's eyes widen upon hearing the bodyguard ask who exactly she is calling an idiot. Ryushin holds his glowing briefcase enveloped in electricity and asks if they have any idea where they are stepping. The goons jump furiously toward the young man, not caring about his provocation. Suddenly, all the lights in the arena mysteriously go out, leaving the place in absolute darkness. The attackers fall into total panic, screaming that they cannot see a single thing with that sudden blackout. The goons desperately call for their leader in the dark to know what they should do faced with that situation. Neo channels her special ability, making her red metal staff catch fire to illuminate the environment. With focused and furious eyes, she orders out loud for her entire gang to keep their calm. The glow of the flames from her staff reveals that all of her men have already been knocked out and are lying on the ground. Neo goes into absolute shock upon realizing the unbelievable speed with which her allies were defeated. Ryushin coldly explains that, even before Ria goes on stage to perform for her fans, he moves like a flash in the dark, passing swiftly past the startled villain. The bodyguard reveals that all the lights in the venue are always turned off beforehand to make his job easier. Neo is caught by surprise by a terrible shockwave that hits her with devastating force. The young man lands an incredibly fast and powerful punch, sending the villain flying backward into the dust. She spits a lot of blood due to the tremendous impact of the blow, unable to believe such brutality. The villain is dragged across the ground with extreme violence, unable to break her body in time. Fallen, Neo realizes with hatred that all that previous conversation of his was just a distraction to gain useful time. Looking at the young man enveloped in blue energy, she mentally defines him as a true, merciless monster. Ryushin hovers slightly above the ground while the pieces of his briefcase glow around him in a frightening way. He warns with a cold voice that, from that exact moment on, he is classifying the villain as a major threat. Activating the brass knuckle mode of his legendary weapon, he categorically states that he is going to eliminate the girl right now. Ryushin faces her head-on in the middle of the darkness. Ready to deliver the definitive final blow, Neo grinds her teeth in pure hatred upon hearing that the young man plans to eliminate all threats completely. The hero continues to maintain a totally impassive and cold posture before his opponent's extreme wrath. Completely infuriated by his disdain, the villain screams for him not to dare get so cocky in her presence. She charges against the bodyguard with blind fury, causing gigantic flames to spread across the entire combat arena. Ryushin easily dodges the flaming strike while charging his electric fist to counterattack with precision. Neo, now displaying long horns and white hair, tells the hero to keep his foolish fantasies for when he is asleep, totally transformed and wielding a gigantic sword of red flames. She charges with even greater fury. She screams that his big dream is nothing but a naive fantasy of a completely deluded fool. Ryushin's energized fist advances with a mind-boggling speed, breaking the sound barrier toward the target. He hits the villain dead-on with his electric strike, shattering her defense and making blood splatter everywhere. The extraordinary force of the impact hurls the girl through the air, causing her to crash against the show's stage. The fans who were already in the audience scream in terror upon seeing a bloodied person suddenly drop right before them. A naive fan comments that she is holding a giant light stick, but his friend realizes that it is definitely not a toy. Ryushin appears walking calmly and lets out a slight grumble of apology for the embarrassing situation. He lightheartedly confesses that he ended up miscalculating the force used in that last devastating blow. Fallen and unable to move, the villain can only stare at the bodyguard with eyes full of pure dread and despair. Ryushin admits that when he first heard about Ri's naive dream, he thought the exact same thing as the villain. He recalls an old conversation he had with the singer in a private dressing room. Ri says that if they help one person at a time, who knows, maybe one day the dream will come true, though she admits that talking is much easier than doing. When the young man asks if she has any idea how many people exist on the planet, the girl answers with a serene smile. She explains that this is exactly why, instead of just talking about the matter, it is necessary to start taking practical action. With a beautiful smile on her face, she concludes by saying that nobody will ever know the final result if they don't truly try. The singer's journey started in a very humble way, but gradually the audience of just one person transformed into 10 fans. Over time, those dozens of spectators quickly became hundreds of people passionate about her music. And now, that small street performance has turned into a monumental show in a gigantic, packed stadium. Hearing the deafening vibration of the crowd, the hero comments that the time has finally come for the singer to go on stage. He states that if he keeps eliminating threats one by one with the same determination as hers, one day he will manage to end all danger in the world. Neo screams angrily, telling him not to be ridiculous because new threats will always keep emerging one after another. She insists that it is absolutely impossible to eliminate all dangers and villains from this world completely. The villain questions again why he doesn't simply ally with rational people like them, but he quickly interrupts her. The young man responds with determination that this is something they will never truly know until they try until the very end. He tells his opponent to just wave her stick and enjoy the music, leaving the girl furious while a little boy in the audience asks to wave one too. Neo complains angrily that every single one of those people in the audience is truly managing to get on her nerves. She focuses her gaze on the bodyguard and questions if he really thinks he can protect everyone there. The villain lets out a sadistic smile and asserts that there is absolutely no such convenient reality in the world. She charges furiously, promising that she will make him understand reality, the hard way right then and there. Neo leaps high toward the heavens, channeling an absurd amount of destructive power into a pillar of blue flames. She screams from up there that naive, soft dream the bodyguard protects so much is nothing but an illusion. The hero just observes her with an extremely focused look, and without showing any sign of fear, the villain unloads a colossal amount of blue flaming energy directly toward the stage. Neo, now sporting wings of blue fire, proclaims that his promises are nothing but mere empty words. She bellows that she is going to blow up the entire concert arena along with his and that singer's dream once and for all. A gigantic sphere of destructive energy begins to descend rapidly from the sky toward the packed stadium without losing his composure. Ryushin activates the lightstick mode of his briefcase and asserts that he will not allow her to do that. He reminds himself of the solemn promise he made to never allow a cruel tragedy to repeat itself again. The young man runs at high speed while sarcastically praising the power of the villain's blue flames. He leaps incredibly high toward the immense sphere of fire, commenting that it is the perfect size for his plan. The bodyguard plans to use that colossal explosion as if it were just an opening special effect for the singer's show. He positions his giant light stick with both hands and delivers an extremely precise strike against the sphere. The impact of his attack simply disperses all the destructive energy of the flames, transforming it into a rain of glowing blue sparks. The villain's immense power is completely neutralized and dissipated in the air by the impressive force of the bodyguard's strike. Neo is left totally perplexed and speechless upon seeing her most powerful secret technique undone so easily. In the dressing room, the beautiful idol Ri prepares to enter the stage, fixing her long silver hair. She walks with elegance and determination toward the spotlights of the grand concert arena. Upon stepping onto the stage, the singer looks up and encounters a sky beautifully illuminated by glowing blue sparks. The fans in the audience also look up, marveled at the sky, believing that all of that is part of the show's grand opening. Ri observes that spectacle of lights, marveled, having no idea of the deadly combat that just took place backstage. Ryushin's blue light stick begins to lose its glow slowly after the conclusion of the epic battle. The hero descends gently from the heavens amidst the clouds and the darkness of the night. He observes the stadium down below while holding his equipment, which guaranteed the peace of the event. Ri's blue eyes shine intensely as she sees the last sparks falling like stars over the audience. A sweet and grateful smile appears on the singer's lips as she realizes that the show of her dreams has finally begun. The idol's voice echoes through the loudspeakers, asking if everyone there is truly ready to begin. Ri raises her hand with enthusiasm to greet the immense crowd of fans who scream her name without stopping. She screams joyfully into the microphone, pumping up the audience even more as they vibrate with emotion in the packed stadium. The entire stadium explodes into a gigantic ovation as the idol begins her highly anticipated musical performance. Some of the most dedicated fans cannot contain their emotion and begin to cry tears of joy upon hearing the first chords of the song. Meanwhile, Neo lies fallen and completely defeated on the backstage floor. Observing the party from afar, Ryushin approaches her calmly and asks ironically if she has already regained consciousness. The villain grumbles in pain, but the young man asks her not to strain herself and just relax to enjoy the beautiful performance. He observes the illuminated stage in the distance and comments proudly about how wonderful his client's performance is. To everyone's surprise, the little boy from the audience appears holding the villain's immense fire sword as if it were just an innocent toy. Neo just remains in absolute silence, digesting her humiliating defeat in silence. She says that he is a poor fool and that it would have been easier if he had gone down there, because nobody can achieve a dream while being gone. Neo warns that, now that negotiations have failed, both he and Ri will be in the constant crosshairs of the relentless tragedy organization. She questions what the bodyguard plans to do from now on, aware of the imminent danger awaiting them. The hero just listens to the villain's words, keeping his gaze focused and totally unyielding, as Ri sings joyfully to her thousands of fans under the stage lights. The combat backstage has concluded. Ryushin replies calmly that he will keep doing exactly what he has always done to protect the one who matters most. The story advances to the grim city of terrorists called Naftofal, where Ryushin plans to stop the danger before it begins. A group of local criminals appears gathered in a dark alley, asking if that is really the agreed location. Suddenly, a hand emerges firmly, holding the famous high-tech briefcase we all already know. Ryushin appears with Neo captured and gagged, commenting if that is the famous city that tragedy supposedly rules. He prepares to leap into action, while the villain, tied to his back, tries to break free desperately. The local thugs draw their swords angrily and ask who on earth the bold intruder in a suit is. The bodyguard proclaims that preventive protection begins right now, charging against the entire group of criminals. The entire gang of criminals charges all at once to attack the hero in a brutal manner. Ryushin dodges the enemy's first attacks with enormous agility. One of the opponents grumbles in pain upon being caught by the energy emanating from the young man. He quickly transforms his high-tech briefcase into a giant electric hammer to initiate the counterattack. The criminals of Naftofal jump together in an attempt to hit the hero from the sides. With a ATE, single devastating swing of his hammer, Ryushin creates a violent shockwave that hits the entire group. The young man knocks out the goons one by one with extreme ease, showing the overwhelming difference in power. In just a few seconds of combat, all the goons already appear defeated and lying unconscious on the ground. The last two surviving criminals scream furiously, asking what he thinks he is doing there. Ryushin stares at them coldly and asks if they cannot see the obvious right before their eyes. With a calm and intimidating look, the hero simply answers that he is just performing his protection work. The criminals break into a cold sweat out of sheer confusion, not understanding absolutely anything of what the intruder meant by that. They comment fearfully that, just as the rumors around the city said, that bodyguard really isn't right in the head. At that moment, an imposing man named Ostium emerges from the shadows, smoking a cigar and questioning if that in fact looks like protection. He is the feared gatekeeper of Naftofal, an extremely dangerous Class S criminal named Ostium. Ryushin answers without hesitation that yes, because each one of those criminals represents nothing but a massive risk to the world. He adds by saying that, sooner or later, all of them would become a direct threat. So he is going to take the chance to eliminate them together. One of the criminals screams enraged, challenging the young man to combat, but Ostium asks for calm and tells him to wait. The dangerous Class S leader says that before they start fighting, he would like to ask just a single important question. He fixes his eyes on the hero with seriousness and questions how he managed to discover the location of that secret hideout. Neo, who remains fallen and gagged on the ground, begins to break into a cold sweat and avert her gaze in an extremely suspicious manner. He explains that that location is an absolute secret that not even the members of the security agency knew about. The captured villain begins to flail out of nervousness, fearing her relentless leader's reaction upon discovering the truth. Ryushin abruptly removes the tape from Neo's mouth, allowing her to finally be able to breathe and speak again. To everyone's surprise, she begins to laugh hysterically and screams the bodyguard's name with mockery. She looks mockingly at the hero in a suit and ironically offers her condolences to him. The villain explains, laughing, that that is the only entrance to the center of the city, and that it is packed with powerful Class A and Class S criminals. She adds that Ostium never allowed a single intruder to pass through there. Being known as the impenetrable guardian, Neo reveals that the only reason they disclosed the location of that secret hideout was to turn it into his final resting place. With a sadistic smile on her face, she guarantees that her elite companions will annihilate the young man without any mercy. While Neo continues screaming orders for the allies to attack already, Ostium interrupts her, calling her name in a serious tone. The Class S giant stares at his subordinate with eyes flashing in fury and asks if she has completely lost her mind. He reprimands her angrily, asking what kind of rotten brain she has to hand over their base's location just to try to save herself. The leader exhales the smoke from his cigar and demands to know where the subordinates who were supposed to be accompanying her are stammering in fear. Neo confesses that they were all captured and taken straight to the singer's show arena. Ostium infuriates upon deducing that she sold out her own allies, but she defends herself, desperately saying they were just captured together. Ostium comments with contempt that Neo is garbage that gives a bad reputation even to the worst villains. The relentless leader coldly warns that as soon as they finish dealing with Ryushin, she will be executed right there without hesitation. Neo falls into complete despair and lets out a scream of absolute shock upon hearing her own final sentence. She cannot believe what she heard and begins to cry, wondering how her situation could end up in such a tragic way. The girl mentally confesses that she truly believed her companions would massacre Ryushin with ease. She realizes, horrified, that if the bodyguard is defeated there by the Class S enemies of that city, she will also end up lost right after. While Ryushin comments ironically that her allies don't seem to stand her desperate, she lets out a nervous laugh and tries to justify herself, saying everything is just a terrible misunderstanding. The other criminals scream furiously for her to shut her mouth, threatening to harm her cruelly in the worst possible ways. One of the goons rants that she has always deeply irritated him with her flashy and loud clothes. They continue to insult the girl in every way, criticizing her behavior and even her hairstyle. Impressed by such hostility, Ryushin asks the girl what she did that was so horrible to be hated that way by everyone. The young girl can only let out murmurs of despair, while tears stream down her frightened face. In total panic with the enemy's furious approach, Neo begs for the young man to hold out while the villains advance, promising to end them. Ostium momentarily interrupts his men, staring at the hero and saying he is going to give him a single chance at salvation. The leader proposes that if Ryushin hands the traitorous girl over to them, he can leave with his life, leaving Neo terrified. The girl begs for him not to believe criminals, but the bodyguard reminds her that she is also part of the same group. The hero just maintains silence for a few moments, coldly evaluating the entire situation around him. Neo stares at him with eyes full of tears, waiting anxiously for an answer that will decide her fate. Ryushin scratches his head thoughtfully and asks out loud what he should do with her, leaving the young girl surprised. The young man lightheartedly comments that the enemies are many and that he doesn't see how to win that fight, startling the opponents. He suggests accepting the deal to hand over the villain so they can pretend nothing happened, making the girl scream desperately for him not to do that. She insists that he is strong enough to beat them, but the hero retorts, saying she only survived before due to being the weakest criminal of all. The young man points out that protecting her now would be like a bodyguard defending a terrorist, but she questions what the problem with that is. Neo argues desperately that even terrorists have the right to hire protection, leaving Ostium perplexed by that whole circus. Without paying much attention to the girl's screams, the Proto begins to take a few steps back calmly. He concludes by coldly saying that she isn't even an official client of his to deserve any kind of protection. Completely ignoring the prisoner's pleas, Ryushin waves with his back turned and simply begins to walk away from the place. The abandoned villain is left in an absolute state of shock upon realizing she was left behind to her own fate. The furious criminals advance en masse, wielding their weapons noisily to execute the traitor right then and there. While the attackers proclaim that all traitors must be punished, Neo begins to cry desperately. She lets out a hysterical scream of pure dread upon seeing the enemy's sharp blades coming down in her direction. From the middle of the darkness, and with his back to the action, the bodyguard in a suit continues his walk without looking back. The young girl continues crying out desperate for help as the goons' brutal attacks almost hit her. In her final moment of desperation, she screams with all her might that she is officially hiring the hero as her personal bodyguard. Upon hearing that crucial declaration, the Proto stops walking immediately in the middle of the dark alley. He turns around with a smirk on his face and asks what the payment for the protection contract will be. Neo promises to pay any amount of money he desires, but the hero immediately answers that he does not want any money. The hero switches on his glowing briefcase and reveals that what he truly wants as payment is something very different from money. The girl widens her eyes, confused and curious to know what the protector is going to demand from her at that moment. A blue holographic contract emerges in the air, stipulating that she must provide all secret information about the tragedy organization. With a shrewd look, he demands absolutely any and all information she possesses regarding the feared agency in full detail. Neo is completely horrified by the absurd demand and stammers, saying that doing that is totally impossible for her. Without wasting time with laments, the young man turns back with his briefcase and warns that if she refuses, the deal is off. The relentless attackers draw even closer with their weapons ready, making the young girl scream in pure panic. Faced with imminent doom and with no other viable way out, she lets out a desperate bellow of dread. The digital contract glows intensely in the air upon officially registering the new client's signature of consent. Crying heavily, the girl bellows for the bodyguard to look and see that she has just signed the document. Ryushin smiles satisfied and announces that the contract is now in effect, releasing a devastating lightning bolt that hits the enemies dead on. To everyone's surprise, the little boy from the audience appears holding the villain's immense fire sword as if it were just an innocent toy. Ostium just observes in silence the immense damage caused by the hero's electric attack. Still sobbing from crying, Neo looks at him and says she will count on his help from now on, with a friendly smile on his face. Ryushin calls her his dear client while holding the signed contract. He advances swiftly toward the remaining enemies with his electric fist fully charged. The Proto lands a devastating punch on one of the armed criminals, shattering his defense immediately. The man screams in pain upon being struck by the violent electric impact of the hero's brass knuckles. Several other goons try to attack him at the same time from the sides, but he prepares to counterattack everyone at once. He moves with superhuman quickness and delivers a punch from top to bottom into the chest of one of the opponents. Right after, he spins his body and hits another criminal with a well-aimed punch. In the middle of the combat, Ryushin distributes electric punches and powerful kicks, knocking down the enemies with extreme ease one after the other. Another 3 criminals run in his direction, wielding their weapons and bellowing in fury. The bodyguard just accumulates a gigantic amount of electricity in his fist to discharge the final blow. He releases an immense shockwave that sweeps away and electrocutes all the rest of the gang at once. Neo watches everything wide-mouthed, murmuring impressed about how incredible that man's strength is. She is shocked to see that he eliminated dozens of enemies in just an instant and reflects on the rumors she had already heard of him. The young girl concludes that his real strength is far superior to anything she could have imagined before. However, she remembers that the Guardian Ostium is different and possesses a special ability that brute force cannot beat. Naftofel is a secret city taken over by dangerous criminals, with extremely hidden entrances that are difficult to access for any outsider. And even if someone manages to discover one of these secret passages, no bodyguard has ever actually managed to set foot inside that maximum security location. The reason for this is very simple, because the feared Ostium is the absolute responsible for guarding and defending the entrance to the secret city. The hero analyzes the scenario and comments that now the only opponent left there is the veteran leader himself. Ostium walks, enveloped in a glowing green aura, and praises the young man for defeating so many men in such a short time. He focuses his eyes on the briefcase and questions if his power comes from that object, allowing him to pull any weapon out from inside it. The villain praises his tactical versatility with weapons, but guarantees that nobody will pass through that gate while he is standing. The Class S giant exhales an absurd amount of glowing green smoke as he prepares to activate his special combat ability. Ryushin stares at the adversary with extreme attention, analyzing the shift in energy occurring right before his eyes. Suddenly, the ground around begins to shake and quickly cover itself with gigantic plates of golden and green metal. That entire metallic structure joins together to form an immense impenetrable gate with glowing and frightening eyes. A voice echoes from the structure, revealing that Ostium himself has transformed into the indestructible entrance gate to the city of Naftofel. Ryushin holds his electric hammer firmly and finds it interesting that the opponent can transform into a giant gate. The immense metallic gate begins to grow even larger in size, increasing its thickness and its impressive defensive armor. Without showing worry, the hero advances swiftly, commenting that a larger size just means he will have more space to deliver his blows. Ryushin advances determined and recalls what he had previously said to the criminals. Ostium's thunderous voice echoes through the place, repeating his promise that the intruder will not manage to enter there by any means. The young man displays an ironic smile and asks in a mocking tone if he really is that certain about it. He changes the shape of his metallic equipment and transforms it into a gigantic, high-power electric cannon to fire against the target. The enormous cannon begins to accumulate a colossal amount of glowing energy in its core, generating a deafening noise. Ryushin fires a gigantic and devastating electric laser beam directly against the armored structure of the metallic gate. However, when the smoke begins to clear, the hero notices surprised that the gate suffered practically no serious damage. The young man breaks into a cold sweat and admits out loud that the durability of that defensive metal armor is truly insane. Neo screams desperate, warning that he will not manage to pass from there just using the brute force of his attacks. She shares that in the past, 5 of the strongest division leaders from the security agency allied to try to defeat Ostium. She reveals that they didn't manage to make a single scratch on him because there is a mandatory special condition that needs to be met for the gate to open. Ryushin stares at the girl with curiosity and asks what that necessary special condition would be, when the hero asks why she herself doesn't know the answer if she is part of the group. Ostium from inside the gate comments that that foolish girl would never know something like that. The Guardian mocks the girl, laughing out loud and asserting that her brain is totally devoid of intelligence. Neo screams extremely irritated, saying she is not an empty-headed fool, but Ryushin agrees with the villain and says she definitely is. Ostium mocks Neo for allying with the enemy, stating that he already couldn't stand her irritating presence from the very beginning. The young girl screams, crying, asking what she did that was so bad for him to hate her, but the Guardian asks if she truly lost her memory. With a frightening look, Ostium solemnly declares that silly and loud people like her are the ones he hates the most in the entire world. Ostium explains that even when the exact date of the invasion against Ryushin was placed in a highly visible way on the bulletin board, Neo preferred to act in a totally independent manner and rushed to the mission taking only her own direct subordinates. Upon hearing that, the girl stammers in complete shock for not knowing about the notice, while Ryushin comments that now he perfectly understands their hatred. The Guardian points out that she did the same with Ryushin's contract by signing it without reading, and tells her to shut up when she tries to justify herself. He rants furiously that foolish idiots like her, who don't even know how to read a contract right, should be completely removed from this world. Neo screams, revolted, asserting that she is not dumb and knows how to read very well. But Ryushin interrupts her, saying she clearly does not. She brags, saying she reads 2 books a week, but upon discovering that they are fairy tales, the hero just ignores the argument to focus on the gate's condition. Neo explains that people who use special powers usually impose certain activation conditions that can be simple or complex. She shares in detail that Ostium's special ability serves solely to create gates that connect to other physical spaces, since it is a gate through which dozens of allies pass every day. The hero deduces that the opening condition cannot be anything complex. Analyzing the argument of both, Ryushin concludes that Ostium got furious because Neo forgot a silly detail and begins to look for some visual clue. Suddenly, the bodyguard's attentive gaze focuses in an extremely precise way on a specific part of the large metallic structure. He calmly observes the 2 golden vertical handles located right in the center of that immense, impenetrable gate. While Neo continues bellowing for them to stop calling her stupid, the hero simply asks for her to shut her mouth and not disrupt his thoughts. The young girl questions indignant if he wasn't on her side, but the young man ignores her completely and warns next that he just discovered the secret. With total tranquility, the Prota solemnly declares that he deciphered the exact condition required to open the feared gate. He comments that he didn't expect the opening secret to be something so absurdly simple. Understanding the reason the Guardian is so angry with the girl, the gigantic metallic gate just observes him in silence. Emitting an imposing and challenging aura throughout the entire environment, Neo looks up totally perplexed and curious, asking how on earth he managed to decipher that mystery so fast. The hero begins to give a detailed explanation, recalling that special abilities are divided into 3 basic categories of power. He lists the first primary category as being purely offensive types of combat. Next, he mentions the second major category, which comprises abilities of a purely defensive character. And finally, the special types, explaining that the difficulty of the conditions varies depending on which category the ability belongs to. Ryushin details that with offensive powers, the more complex and difficult the usage restriction is, the more powerful and devastating the user's final attack will be. Whereas in defensive abilities, the exact opposite occurs, because the simpler the usage condition is, the more impenetrable and resistant the user's defensive barrier will be. He points out that special types assume very varied forms, so he decides to set that category aside at the moment. The young man explains that Ostium's power, which transforms him into an armored gate, is classically categorized as a defensive type ability, and evaluating the impressive and absurd durability his barrier demonstrated against the previous attacks, the Proto deduces that the condition required to open the metal gate needs to be something absurdly simple and direct. The hero asks if the girl managed to understand the logical reasoning, causing her to question anxious what that simple condition would be. After all, Ryushin conjures chains of glowing blue energy in his hands and warns that the answer to that riddle is very obvious. He fires the electric chains with extreme precision directly toward the top of the immense armored gate. The links of blue energy wrap themselves perfectly around the two immense golden handles of the structure. The bodyguard pulls the chains with full force to make them very tight and tensed against the metallic object. He smiles mockingly and reveals that the condition is not to push the door with attacks, but rather to pull it by the handles. Neo widens her eyes and lets out a murmur of complete incredulity upon hearing that silly and unexpected revelation. The young girl says it's impossible to be something so simple, but the hero argues that no other condition would be more efficient for a gate through which so many allies pass. He explains that over the years, countless intruders tried to tear down that structure by force using explosive attacks from the outside. The young man details through a diagram that every time they attacked, the energy went from the outside in, which in practice meant they were pushing the door. Since the invasion attempts only pushed the structure, it never opened, given that the gate was designed solely to open when pulled. Ryushin praises the Guardian's brilliant idea, commenting that it is an incredibly simple condition, yet of an extremely deceptive character. The girl refuses to believe the secret is that silly, but the Proto warns that he has definitive proof to support his theory for good. He points his index finger at the structure and reveals that it is literally written to pull right in the middle of the metal door. Neo goes into complete mental block and lets out another scream of astonishment faced with that unbelievable revelation. Ostium's metallic gate begins to glow intensely, right in the slit between the two golden metal leaves. The light clearly reveals the word to pull engraved in high relief right in the center of the armored defensive structure. Alongside the instruction to pull, there is also a polite glowing sign, kindly asking people to take a step back. The young girl is left with a totally foolish and open-mouthed expression before that extreme simplicity of the barrier. Completely indignant, she rants furiously against the leader, asking what kind of idiot writes the opening condition right there in plain sight of everyone. Ostium's immense yellowish eye glows with extreme fury on the gate, while he bellows back that the only idiot there is herself. Ostium, irritated, asks her when she thinks he started writing that instruction on the gate. He screams that he wrote that especially for her, right after she joined Tragedy. Neo complains for him not to blame her, saying he should have spoken out loud instead of writing, but he retorts that he has already spoken more times than he can count. Ostium remembers that, at the end of the day, the girl always did the same thing. In the past, she used to complain that the gate wouldn't open and asked for him to let her pass, while he told her to just pull instead of pushing. Even with him warning that it was literally written to pull, she insisted on kicking and forcing the entrance anyway. She screamed, saying it was stuck, while he begged desperately for her to just pull the handle, except she continued banging her head, using her staff, and delivering violent kicks against the metal structure. The Guardian unburdens with anger that it didn't matter how many hundreds of times he ordered to pull. People simply continued pushing. Ryushin agrees and comments that there are always people who insist on pushing. Even when it is written in a very clear way to pull, Ostium screams that it's not just Neo, but rather everyone who ignores the warning and tries to break down the door like a bunch of uneducated fools. Neo tries to justify herself, saying she didn't know that was the condition, causing the gate to scream for her not to make up a new word. The Guardian even cries, begging for people to learn how to read, and the Proto decides to end that discussion. The hero warns that he is going to pull the gate the right way and tells it to open once and for all. Even knowing that the opponent discovered the secret, Ostium warns that he cannot let him pass and that he will resist with all his might with a smile on his face. Ryushin asks ironically what the Guardian is talking about. He begins to pull the chains with extreme strength and declares that a gate that refuses to open. The Guardian becomes startled by the young man's power and wonders how he can be so absurdly strong. Ryushin completes by saying that in that case the gate should just be labeled as closed, impressed by what she is seeing. Neo screams, startled by the Proto's name, with his eyes glowing red. He asserts that a gate must act as such and open completely. Ostium laments frustrated for never having let an intruder enter before, realizing that his perfect defense fell that way. The Guardian blames Neo for everything, screaming that it is her fault for him having written that notice exclusively for her. While being forced to open entirely, Ostium bellows with all his might that he will never forgive the girl for this. He warns that he will hold this grudge forever, while the young girl just lets out a nervous, awkward laugh, and it was exactly on that day that Ostium's legendary and impenetrable gate finally ended up being opened by force by the hero. With this, the bodyguard Ryushin manages to successfully conclude his infiltration into the fortress city of Naftafal. Meanwhile, at the same moment, the scene shifts to Tragedy's headquarters in the city. Inside the luxurious building, some of the elite members of the criminal organization are already gathered. They wait patiently for the start of an important meeting that is about to begin. The leader at the table observes the environment and comments in a cold way that it seems all the guests have already arrived. He brings his fingers together and declares that they can now begin the proceedings. The man warns that the agenda of the day will be opened immediately. He reveals that the main subject of the meeting is the recent infiltration of the bodyguard Ryushin into their territory. This is Palmer, the feared president of the Tragedy Union, who conducts the meeting with a dark smile. He begins by explaining that the hero's power is classified as a special type ability. The president details that Ryushin stores his own spiritual energy inside that briefcase he carries. He continues explaining that the young man uses this stored energy to create various types of combat weapons. One of the members at the table interrupts and asks if this ability of the enemy possesses any obvious limitation. Palmer answers that most likely the intruder is unable to summon any weapon if he is not with his briefcase. One of the members questions the reason Ryushin invaded the location, pointing out that he abandoned the idol he was supposed to protect to come all the way here. Another villain asks if that famous client they are talking about is that young girl named Ri. The girl with glasses asks who, after all, hired the group to eliminate the singer, since she doesn't even seem to be that famous. Palmer lets out a mysterious smile and begins to answer the group's question. He warns that this information is confidential and cannot be revealed at the moment, but promises to tell everything later. A tense silence takes over the large meeting room after that evasive response from the boss. The president decrees that, either way, they need to capture Ryushin before he begins to cause destruction in the city. He closes the matter looking at those present and asks who among them volunteers to go hunt the intruder already. Ryushin and Neo begin to walk through the bright and modern streets of the busy city of Naftafal, disguised with glasses and a fake mustache. The hero comments that everyone called that place a terrorist city, but looking around he notices that the residents there seem like ordinary people living their daily routines. Several civilians walk calmly along the sidewalks, without demonstrating any suspicious behavior. He concludes that the location just seems like an ordinary city, and that any place where people live ends up looking like this. Neo asks ironically if he really expected to find explosions happening non-stop, but everywhere she complains about the wait and asks how long they are going to use the disguises, but he calls her an idiot and warns that their faces are too famous. She suggests that they just beat up whoever attacks them, reminding him that there are many civilians there, and the hero finds it funny for a criminal to worry about civilians. The Proto decides to change the subject and calls the girl's attention. He asks if the plan really is to go straight to Tragedy's headquarters, and she confirms that yes. She grumbles in thought, hurrying the bodyguard so that they walk faster. She remembers the moment she was shocked to learn that they were going to invade the organization's headquarters itself. The hero asked if she had any problem with that, and she responded desperate that that was a gigantic problem. The young girl argued that the main leaders gathered there, but the young man responded calmly that that was perfect. Next, the hero told her to remember what his protection philosophy was. He explained that he eliminates every threat right at the start so that danger never reaches the client, adding that gathering the enemies in one place is great. She questioned what he intended to do, invading the location alone, and he retorted asking why she thought he was alone. The young man smiled and reminded her that in reality, there were two of them there for that mission. She screamed that she was a criminal and not an ally, but the young man told her to accept that she was discarded and join him to redeem herself. The girl suggested that they at least prepare themselves and look for more allies if they were really going to invade, but the Proto interrupted her. He pondered that the enemies wouldn't just stay waiting seated, and that they would also use this time to prepare themselves. He explained that this would only make the fight larger and longer, which is why they needed to crush them before they had time to react. With an intimidating smile, he told her to take them to the headquarters already, recalling that both had a sealed contract, faced with that absurd pressure and with no way out. The girl just remained in complete silence. In the present, the girl thinks mockingly that that contract is a joke and that she has the least intention of truly following it. With a wicked smile, she thinks for him to enjoy the food while he can, because that will certainly be his last meal. She reveals mentally that they are not going to the headquarters, but rather to the local security firm of Naftafal called Security. She knows that the organization currently thinks she betrayed the group and switched sides, but she has a plan to resolve this. The girl plans to hand the hero over directly to the company's security team to clear up this whole misunderstanding at once. With this, she believes she will finally be able to return to her normal routine of committing criminal acts like before. Suddenly, the girl's eyes widen in pure shock upon spotting a huge red poster pasted on the wall of an alley. On the mural, there are 2 wanted posters with very high rewards for the heads of Ryushin and also of Neo herself. Neo's poster offers a reward of $200,000 for her capture, with express permission to take her out. The hero looks closely at the notices and complains, finding it irritating that the reward for the girl's head is larger than his. Upon realizing what that truly means, the young girl lets out a victorious laugh full of malice. She changes her mind on the spot and screams, excited for them to go straight to the headquarters, making up that they just took the wrong path. Back in the large meeting room, one of the group members reinforces that President Palmer himself should lead this hunt. Surprised by the unexpected suggestion of his subordinate, the leader of Tragedy asks for him to repeat what he just said. The man in a wizard hat argues that the group doesn't usually accept jobs without knowing the real identity of the client beforehand. She compliments that since Palmer is the only one who knows who made the hiring, he himself must resolve this, and the other agrees President Palmer just observes his counsel in absolute silence, maintaining a serious and impenetrable countenance. He lets out a long sigh and says he has no other choice, revealing that he was already planning to tell the truth, soon. Palmer adjusts himself in his chair and begins to formally reveal the identity of the person who ordered the end of the singer Ree. Suddenly, the entire meeting room begins to shake violently with a loud crash that startles everyone present. On the outside, in the middle of the street, civilians stop walking and look startled toward the top of the organization's immense tower. The reflection in President Palmer's eyes shows the silhouette of the hero falling at high speed directly from the sky against the building. The glass ceiling of the building is totally shattered, with a violent explosion of dust and debris flying in all directions. The residents who are on the street watch everything completely in shock and paralyzed before that sudden and devastating attack. As the smoke begins to clear slowly in the destroyed meeting room, the villains prepare for the worst. In the middle of the dust, Ryushin emerges, falling with his giant blue energy hammer, and smashes Tragedy's meeting table with everything. Ryushin tells those present that since they are the executives, this saves his work of hunting them. While Neo murmurs desperate that she knows nothing, he prepares to fight against the enemies gathered there and coldly warns that he is ready to begin. Palmer finds amusement in the bodyguard's audacity and comments ironically about how he is a lost cause for having invaded the location. Tragedy is known worldwide as the largest and most dangerous criminal organization on the entire planet, led by President Palmer. The organization counts on the strategic command of 5 highly dangerous vice presidents. Without wasting time, the hero positions his high-tech briefcase and begins to channel his glowing blue spiritual energy. One of the vice presidents observes the hero with a cynical smile and comments that he looks much better than in the wanted photos. Ryushin just stares back at her with a serious and focused look, totally prepared for any type of counterattack. The executives begin to mock his youth and his audacity, commenting that arrogant guys like him usually don't last long. The mysterious platina-haired vice president just observes him in silence. Without demonstrating any reaction or emotion, Palmer lets out a laugh and comments that the young man is truly as reckless as the rumors said by invading their territory alone. The hero corrects him, saying he is not alone due to having Neo by his side, making the girl bellow desperate that she has nothing to do with him. Palmer invites the intruder to sit and talk, but the hero refuses, saying he is not tired and that he was guided there by Neo. The Prota points his hand toward the group and warns that besides that, he has nothing to discuss. The president of Tragedy just observes the blue energy approach him with extreme tranquility. The hero advances with absurd speed and delivers a strike charged with electricity straight against the leader's seat. He coldly declares that he has absolutely nothing to talk about with a bunch of criminals and outlaws. However, suddenly, the hero widens his eyes upon realizing something very wrong and unexpected in his attack. He notices that his strike passed right through the president's body without causing any type of physical damage or real impact. The young man is left confused before that situation and questions himself mentally what kind of bizarre ability that would be. Palmer lets out a mocking smile and responds that that actually does not concern a special combat ability. He reveals himself to be just a technological hologram and mocks the idea that executives so busy would meet in person because of an intruder. The leader of the criminal organization warns that he still has another very important detail to reveal to the bodyguard. Palmer says in a tone of disdain for the young man not to brag so much, asserting that he is still not at the required level to face the group. Suddenly, an immense wave of purple and destructive energy begins to emerge around the Prota, surrounding him completely. Realizing the imminent danger, the hero leaps backward in an agile way to escape that deadly energy trap. The president's hologram just observes him dodge the attack, maintaining an expression of mockery and total superiority. Ryushin manages to land firm on the ground, but notices that his movements are slightly limited by that spiritual pressure. He finds the technique quite irritating and tries to analyze mentally if the opponent's power would be of the special or offensive type. The villain smiles with disdain and prepares to give one last freebie to his insistent and problematic intruder. He comments that, because of the courage the hero had to invade the location, he will at least share a valuable piece of information with him. Palmer reveals with coldness that the mysterious person who ordered the end of the idol Ri is someone Ryushin himself knows very well. Upon hearing that shocking and unexpected revelation, the hero is left completely paralyzed and without reaction in the middle of the room. While his hologram begins to disappear, Palmer says goodbye in a cynical way, wishing that he survives long enough for them to meet again. The Prota ignores the leader's goodbye and continues focused on his own thoughts, trying to figure out who this person could be. From the floor, Neo screams desperate to the hero, warning that that is definitely not the adequate moment for him to stay daydreaming. She points in total panic to the large destroyed opening in the wall and bellows that their feared containment team has just arrived. The bodyguard places the girl back on his shoulders and asks with total tranquility whom she is referring to. An immense armored military-style security vehicle emerges on the outside with its glowing sirens flashing intensely. Neo screams terrified that it concerns the Marshals, the relentless elite force that commands the security of the entire Naftafol region. The hero repeats the group's name in a tone of doubt, demonstrating not to know the violent reputation of that special team. The door of the armored vehicle opens slowly, revealing the imposing silhouette of a high-ranking officer who is disembarking. The elegant man in a military uniform adjusts his bow tie calmly and comments that it has already been a long time since his last mission. He walks slowly through the destroyed location and comments about the impressive vibration of that large explosion from before, adjusting his golden monocle. The elderly gray-haired officer says that it has already been some time since he performed a good showcase. Neo cries in despair, saying that that is their end, while the hero asks calmly if the old officer is really that dangerous. The young girl warns that the threat level of that man is officially Class S, making the bodyguard repeat the information curious. He comments that Neo and Ostium are also of that category and seem weak, but she explains that this is the maximum classification of their system. She adds that the members of Tragedy don't usually classify opponents in this same manner, leaving the hero thoughtful. The girl begins to explain in detail that the criminal syndicate of Tragedy functions in a way very similar to a modern company. She explains that Class D and Class C members occupy the basic position of section chiefs in the hierarchy. Going up a bit, Class B members act in command as department heads. Meanwhile, highly capable Class A members assume the important positions of deputy directors. Everything above that is controlled by Class S, where the strength of each member varies greatly depending on their position. With her eyes wide in fear, she warns that the man who just arrived at the location is actually the feared president of security, tasked with taking care of all internal security for Tragedy. In other words, she summarizes terrified that he is someone absurdly powerful and unbeatable in combat. The elderly officer closes his eyes calmly and begins to move his arms in an extremely graceful way. He raises his glowing baton in the air and smoothly pronounces the musical command to begin the performance. A violent, invisible shockwave hits the intruders and hurls Ryushin and Neo with extreme force against the floor. While the hero tries to recover from the impact, the girl bursts into tears, screaming desperate that her life is over. The commander turns calmly toward his lined-up subordinates and calls the attention of everyone present. He proposes playing a requiem song for the intruders, and the soldiers respond in unison, agreeing with the leader below President Palmer and the 5 vice presidents. The criminal enterprise possesses 10 influential presidents in command. These 10 presidents are the direct responsible for managing the various divisions and subsidiaries of the criminal organization. Neo explains that the hierarchy follows from the lowest section chief, passing through manager, director, president, until reaching the top. She details that the Marshals protect the organization and that the feared president of this internal security sector is none other than the powerful commander known by everyone by the code name of Maestro. The hero asks what Neo's position is in the hierarchy, and she answers that she proudly occupies the position of director. He comments that now he understands the reason she is so weak, making the young girl bellow, irritated that directors are also very strong. The bodyguard finds it ironic for a criminal faction to have a security division, and begins to notice a strange detail in the opponent. He questions the reason the commander abruptly interrupted his sequence of attacks against them. The young man analyzes that the elderly man gathered people who use instruments as weapons to form an orchestra-style unit. The soldiers of the elite division just observe him in silence, firmly holding their dangerous musical instruments. One of the agents positions her immense golden metal instrument, waiting patiently for her commander's order. Other sharpshooters prepare their bows against the violin strings, ready to fire blasts of sound energy. Ryushin points out that they are forgetting a very important detail, leaving the girl by his side confused with the statement. One of the female soldiers approaches Maestro, makes a military salute, and reports that they finished evacuating all civilians from the region. The elderly man applauds smoothly and praises the agent's excellent work, calling her by her name of Bio. Since the evacuation ran perfectly and without any unexpected event, the commander decides it is time to take the next step. The tuba soldier kneels excited, suggesting to just blow up the entire building already with the two intruders trapped inside it. Maestro warns that there is no need to act with such exaggeration, but she argues that bringing down the building would make things easier. The leader gestures to his troops and proudly reminds them that they are tragedy's respected elite orchestra. He asks to maintain elegance and manners while capturing the two opponents, bowing in a respectful way. However, the female soldiers comment in a low voice whether the president might have lost it for refusing to order an immediate full attack. The true and single reason for the commander's hesitation involved an enormous amount of repair money. A few days ago, the elderly man had been summoned for a quite serious conversation in President Palmer's personal office. Palmer complained about the excess of damage to the company's properties, pointing out that the officer had already destroyed dozens of buildings that year. Because of this, the leader determined that all reconstruction invoices would be sent directly to the security sector's account. The elderly officer was left totally shocked and incredulous with that unexpected financial punishment from his boss. Knowing nothing of this, the hero continues leaning against the rubble and wonders why the adversaries take so long to attack to avoid expensive damage to the structure. Maestro orders that only the string trio advance to make the quiet capture. The three elite agents nod with firmness and prepare to fulfill the mission designated by their commander. The brass soldiers complain about staying only in the tactical support of the rear, while questioning about what they will do with Director Neo. The commander places his hand on his chin and warns in a thoughtful way that he needs to reflect a bit on the traitor's fate. The string trio begins to walk toward the rubble of the destroyed room, with their instruments in combat position. Upon realizing their approach, Ryushin comments with tranquility that it seems the opponent finally decided to act on the outside. Commander Maestro makes an elegant gesture in the air with his glowing baton to give the starting signal. He pronounces the quick musical command, initiating the accelerated attack tempo of his special string trio. In the same instant, the agents fire a devastating blast of cutting sound energy directly in the direction of the two intruders. The string trio advances in close formation, playing their instruments and generating strong impact waves. The hero declares, smiling, that the real battle is going to begin now, but the girl screams desperate, asking him to wait. She says there is something of extreme importance that they need to do first. Leaving both Ryushin and the trio of opponents confused, Bio clears her throat and recites that they have the right to remain silent and to an attorney, making the hero doubt if they are really criminals. Neo ignores her partner's comment and screams desperate, calling the soldier an officer. She alleges that everything is a misunderstanding and begs for help, while Ryushin calls her a traitor, and Bio reveals having orders about her. Bio warns that Palmer wants Neo alive for thinking it's a misunderstanding, alleging that with her intellect, she would never manage to rebel against the group. The girl is immensely relieved and asks if it's true, while the Prota observes her with an intrigued look. The young girl heaps praises on the enemies, declaring in an exaggerated way that the marshals are the true and heroic protectors of the people. With tears of extreme happiness in her eyes, the girl bellows, thanking immensely for their kindness and understanding. She continues crying and efficiently thanks the violin staff for the wonderful decision to spare her life. However, upon hearing her thanks, the expression of the three soldiers shifts instantly to a cold and severe countenance. The hero just observes that sudden shift of atmosphere in silence, waiting to see what their reaction will be. Neo stops crying and is completely confused upon noticing that tense and hostile mood that took over the environment. One of the female soldiers pronounces herself in a sharp way, breaking the silence and calling the direct attention of the young girl on the floor with a deadly look. The other elite soldier coldly declares that her sentence will actually be immediate elimination. Neo complains about the sudden mood shift of the violin lady, but the other soldier screams furious, asking if she just called her that. The girl argues that she in fact holds a violin, and the blonde soldier agrees with a gentle smile that that is correct. However, upon pointing to the colleague by her side and saying that he also plays a violin, the silver-haired man becomes possessed with anger. To make it worse, she points to the third and says he plays a giant violin, leaving the strong warrior extremely offended and irritated. The elite trio stares at her with deep hatred, calling the girl an insolent brat for insulting their art and their instruments. They channel their respective colored auras and decree that she will be executed along with Ryushin, leaving her without understanding the reason the Prota asks in an innocent way if she said some nonsense, and the girl responds exasperated, asserting that most certainly yes. Ryushin begins to list each one's instruments to understand the confusion, pointing out that the blonde really plays a violin. He proceeds and correctly identifies that the second soldier plays a viola, making the combatant nod satisfied, and finally, the hero points to the third and says his instrument is a cello, winning the warrior's immediate approval. Grateful for the precision, Bio warns that she is going to try to convince the president to spare the young man, leaving Neo indignant for being the only one sentenced. The blonde soldier laments, commenting that she truly expected to resolve the girl's entire situation in a peaceful way and without violence. But with companions so offended by her side, she warns that her hands are tied and officially declares the execution of the traitor. The other two musicians begin to play in a synchronized way, generating immense tracks of colored spiritual energy in the environment. Bio completes the sentence, and the group's sonic and cutting attacks are fired all at once in the direction of the defenseless girl. An immense and violent explosion of smoke and dust consumes the location where the two intruders were positioned. However, the trio widens their eyes upon hearing the hero's calm voice saying he understands their feelings, but cannot allow that an immense tactical barrier of blue and glowing energy emerges in the middle of the dust, perfectly blocking all impact of the attack. Ryushin emerges unharmed, holding his shield, and comments in an ironic way that the girl is his main source of profit, correcting later to client next. He directly faces the three adversaries and nominally cites each of their musical instruments. With his eyes glowing red, he warns that he is classifying all of them as real threats and that he is going to eliminate them right now. While the combat initiates in the room, Commander Maestro watches everything from the outside with a sweaty and quite worried expression. The red and yellow lights of the military vehicle continue flashing in a frantic way, in the midst of the tense silence of the streets. The elderly officer demonstrates immense worry for the physical integrity of the street structures, fearing the final price of the loss. In the interior of the destroyed building, the bodyguard stays firm in his defense posture. Protecting his startled informant, Maestro tightens his command baton with strength, aware that any error of calculation can end up destroying the entire block. The soldier Bio positions herself in front of her orchestra companions, waiting only for her master's starting signal, firmly holding her bow and custom pink violin. She prepares to give start to a new combat symphony. Maestro adjusts his golden monocle in an extremely precise way and focuses his attentive look directly on the young intruder. Neo tries to alert the young man about the group tactics of that feared special division of the organization. She explains in a quick way that they usually coordinate their sound attacks perfectly to nullify enemy defenses. The hero simply ignores her warning and begins to alter the configuration of his powerful, tactical briefcase to defense mode. The young girl just stares at him in complete silence, rooting internally for the young man to truly have an efficient escape plan. And thus, before tragedy's immense and mysterious tower, the violent combat of life or death is about to restart. Ryushin attentively observes the opponent's attack pattern. While waves of sonic energy collide against his blue shield, he manages to perform an impressive aerial acrobatics in the middle of the air to dodge with surgical precision from a deadly sonic blast. The young man moves with extreme agility through the rubble, dodging each of the cutting notes fired by the trio. The hero genuinely praises their combat technique, recognizing that it concerns an incredibly well-coordinated strategy. He comments that the combat musical performance they present is magnificent, but explains that it is exactly why. The young man concludes that the true destructive power of that sonic combination is frighteningly dangerous to face. Straight-on Bio is flattered by the opponent's praise and comments with a smile on her face that he truly possesses a good ear for music. Ryushin responds that his client, after all, is a professional of this musical branch, justifying his good knowledge in the area. Bio lets out a sarcastic laugh and comments that he truly seems to have found an excellent client to protect. She confesses that she is almost without desire to eliminate him and suggests in an ironic way for the hero to just surrender peacefully. He retorts saying he cannot do that and that the three of them are too valuable to spare. But the opponents reject the proposal on the spot. Neo loses her patience for good and screams, telling the two to stop exchanging compliments in the middle of the battle to fight for real. The hero asks if she cannot appreciate the beautiful musical harmony, but she retorts furious that she is dodging desperately to survive. The girl bellows, telling him to finish off the three enemies already. While the prota lets out a downcast sigh, lamenting the waste indignant with her partner's calm attitude, the girl screams, demanding that he stop complaining about waste at a moment like that. The young man praises again the group's refined performance and begins to explain in detail how the melody is guided by the violin. He proceeds explaining that the viola acts perfectly as a harmony bridge between the violin's high pitch and the cello's low pitch, and concludes that the cello gives the ideal support from bottom to top, making that entire musical and combat combination flawless. The hero confesses that he could listen to that song all day, making the girl bellow, desperate that she is going to end up lost if he does nothing. He looks seriously at the ally and explains in a calm way that the real problem is not him refusing to end the fight at once. With a focused look behind his energy barrier, the hero reveals that the truth is that he simply cannot attack them. He confesses that their teamwork is so perfectly synchronized that there is no breach in their wall for him to take advantage of. The young man continues analyzing with much attention all the beautiful harmony woven jointly by the sound of the violin, the viola, and the cello. Without patience for his artistic analyses, the girl screams furious, complaining about that endless repetition of instrument names. She rants with all her might, revealing that to her ears, all that noise sounds like the exact same thing. Upon hearing that revelation of musical ignorance from the girl, the prota is left with a totally frozen face, and in complete silence, the elite trio also interrupts the music for an instant, staring at the girl with murderous looks and pure hatred. After her insult, one of the warriors screams irritated, asking what kind of horrible ear she has to think that refined art sounds the same. Neo stubbornly insists on her opinion, screaming back that it is all the same and that they just keep repeating the harmony talk. She concludes her absurd reasoning, bellowing that the three-string instruments seem absolutely identical to her. One of the musicians tightens his instrument's bow with extreme fury against his fingers, trembling with hatred before such offense. They stare at her with anger and ask in a disbelieving way if she truly does not possess the basic capacity to differentiate them. The girl mocks, asking how they can speak of harmony being that everyone uses the same type of instrument, suggesting ironically playing with mirrors. The elite trio's leader warns with coldness that, given this, they are going to present a new song with a very different execution. He promises to play in a way so brutal and distinct that even her ears will be perfectly capable of understanding. In the same instant, a blast of devastating and extremely loud energy hits the girl directly, making her bellow in pain. Bio begins to play with full force and coldly explains that the highest voice belongs to the violin, which carries the main theme of the melody. Another massive wave of sonic energy grazes the girl, leaving her even more desperate and injured in the middle of the rubble. The second musician plays with aggressiveness and teaches that the middle voice is the viola, directly responsible for shaping the piece's entire atmosphere. The young girl is hurled into the air by an extremely violent and heavy sonic impact, letting out another scream of complete suffering. Finally, the third soldier executes his part and teaches that the lowest voice is the cello, responsible for the sound's weight and depth. Bio asks in a threatening way if she finally managed to understand the difference, and the girl responds, trembling with fear, that it became very clear. The bodyguard returns to pronounce himself and praises the incredible skill and individual presence that each of the three soldiers possesses in the field. However, he calls their attention to a grave strategic mistake they committed in the last sequence of attacks. The hero recalls that at the start of the combat, their teamwork was absurdly perfect and without any defense breach. He sincerely confesses that at that time, he managed to dodge each attack with extreme difficulty due to lack of openings. Except now, irritated with the insults, each of them started trying to shine alone and take the spotlight on the basis of selfishness. He explains that this lack of sync made it incredibly easy to slip through between the energy blasts of each of their strikes. In a quick move, the hero conjures the tactical cannon mode of his briefcase and aims the immense flow of blue energy straight against the trio. Faced with that immense destructive power charged in their direction, the three elite soldiers are left totally paralyzed with dread. The immense blast of blue energy travels at ultra-high speed, straight in the direction of the three startled musicians. Observing the scene with coldness, Ryushin coldly classifies all that noise and their music just as static. On the outside, Commander Maestro watches that scene in complete shock and with cold sweat trickling down his face. The powerful shockwave hits the top of the tower dead on, generating an immense trail of smoke and explosion in the air. Desperate with the financial loss, Maestro bellows at the top of his lungs, lamenting for the building's destruction. Next, he looks up and wonders apprehensive about the health state of his special string trio. The three combatants fall heavily on the floor right in front of their commander, covered in dust and bruised. The support female soldiers scream horrified upon seeing the division's elite warriors fallen and totally defeated. They run to check if they are still breathing, and one of them answers, groaning in pain that they managed to survive by a hair bio, stares at the destroyed ceiling without managing to believe that the elite trio was bested in a way so quick and humiliating. The elderly man kneels crying heavily and begs for them not to go, but in reality he is worried about something else. He unburdens, asking if they have an idea of the absurd price it's going to cost to tune all those expensive instruments. The commander raises his look, taken with extreme fury, and pronounces the prota's name with deep hatred. Ryushin and Neo walk with total tranquility out of the smoke curtain. Without presenting any scratch, the elderly bodyguard decides to step into action personally and summons his remaining troops to avenge the defeated trio. With mockery, the hero comments that the captain finally made his entrance and says he is anxious to hear the next showcase. The elderly man asks if the backup instruments for the string trio are already set, and the rear soldier confirms that yes. He warns that if they break again, he will deduct it from their salary, making the soldier threaten to quit before the boss says it was a joke. The commander raises his hand again in the air and gives the formal order for the entire orchestra to give start to the final performance. Ryushin and Neo notice a drastic change in the environment's energy when the elderly man's baton begins to glow intensely. A massive and devastating torrent of multicolored sound energy is fired instantly against the intruder's position. With quick reflexes, the hero positions his tactical briefcase ahead and begins to raise his protective barrier of blue energy. He channels all his spiritual force to expand the shield and protect himself and his partner from the imminent danger. The violent sound energy beam hits the blue barrier dead on, generating an absurd spiritual pressure in the environment. The hero notices that their attack power increased drastically with more musicians playing, while Neo just groans with dread. He comments that the melody under the conductor's direction is fantastic, but the girl screams desperate, telling him to shut his mouth and protect her. The young man maintains his focus on the combat and begins to coldly analyze the power structure of that elite orchestra. He notices that the ordinary soldiers possess purely offensive abilities, converting the music into destructive energy projectiles, and notices that the commander acts as a special support, applying absurd upgrades and buffs to the attributes of each of his soldiers. With the increase in the number of musicians attacking in harmony, the tactical breaches in their defense reduced to practically zero. Faced with all that immense combat pressure, the prota decides it is time to drastically change his strategy. The hero looks at his informant and orders in a direct way that she begin to provoke the adversaries with insults and mockery. He explains that he needs her to distract the musicians with insults to create breaches in their perfect attack wall. He admits that he has been looking restlessly for some sync flaw in the enemy orchestra, but it's impossible to find it. He jokes saying that insulting others is her major specialty, and tells her to say any nonsense that comes to her head. The young girl takes a deep breath, gathers courage, and lets out a huge scream in the direction of the soldiers to call everyone's attention. She begins to make childish faces and slaps the opponents verbally, screaming that their performance is horrible and that she plays better. The hero is disappointed with the silly provocations and asks if she is in preschool, but she defends herself, saying she just followed the orders. The young man sighs, downcast in thought, believing that that childish attitude will have absolutely no practical effect on the enemy. However, to his surprise, the support female soldiers begin to get extremely red and irritated with her faces. Totally infuriated with the girl's audacity, one of the musicians puffs her cheeks and prepares to attack on her own. Realizing his orchestra's loss of focus, Maestro gestures quickly and orders for them to maintain calm and not fall for the silly provocation. The hero notices that the adversaries recovered focus and sync very fast, leaving the girl by his side worried about the next step. He mentally concludes that the best strategy and ideal scenario would be to manage to destabilize the group's conductor directly. The young man focuses his analytical look on the elderly commander. Trying to find in a frantic way some viable way to hit him, Maestro raises his glowing command baton in the air again and smoothly dictates the low and subtle notes of the tactical attack. Melody, Ryushin, and Neo are caught totally by surprise when their attack pattern alters in a sudden and silent way. A powerful invisible beam of sound energy is fired silently against them with an unbelievable speed. The hero manages to leap aside in the last millisecond to dodge by a hair from that almost imperceptible energy blast. He manages to dodge in time out of pure luck and sighs with relief for managing to react to that silent and deadly sonic attack. Ryushin opens his eyes surprised, at the same time in which the conductor Maestro himself begins to demonstrate nervousness and cold sweat. The elderly man turns quickly in panic, realizing that the vibration of the last sonic attack hit the building's structure directly. He screams desperate for his troops to play in a subtle way, but one of the soldiers argues confused that they always play that part with force. Maestro rants, saying that that was before, and that now they must follow his baton, making the subordinate accept the order reluctantly. The Proto observes from above the small dispute between the leader and the musicians, noticing a subtle change in their energy flow. He focuses his attentive look on the opponents, realizing immediately that he finally found the perfect breach he looked for so much. The hero warns that that is the ideal cue for Neo to enter action, but the girl despairs and asks if he wants her to fight. She refuses, saying it's impossible to beat them, and accuses him of trying to abandon her to flee alone, making the hero sigh. Tired, he reveals in a direct way that her combat staff is stored inside his tactical briefcase and tells her to go get it. Neo opens her mouth in complete shock and asks, surprised, if he really took the trouble to carry her favorite weapon all the way here. The high-tech briefcase's lid opens, revealing the pink metal staff glowing intensely in its internal compartment. With her eyes glowing with joy, the young girl firmly holds her favorite weapon and celebrates in a quite enthusiastic way. She celebrates, saying she thought she would never see the staff again, but the hero interrupts her and tells her to pay close attention to the plan. The bodyguard focuses his serious look on the girl and begins to dictate the exact instructions of the strategy he drew for the two. However, Neo ignores his orders and leaps high in the air, carrying her staff wrapped in intense flames, mocking the plan idea. With an insane and treacherous smile on her face, she bellows with all her might, telling the hero to get lost while attacking from behind. Except upon hitting his blue barrier, a violent counterattack of electricity hits her dead on, hurling her with everything backward. She falls on the floor crying in pain and asks the reason for that, and the young man just advises her to stop with the betrayals for the good of her health. He calmly explains that he wrote a clause in their contract dictating that any attack delivered against him would return to her. Totally horrified and stunned before that revelation, the girl stammers, asking if he is really capable of doing something like that. She realizes, startled, that his ability goes far beyond summoning weapons, but the young man simply tells her to hurry up and get ready. Neo observes him thoughtful and questions herself mentally about how on earth a single person manages to master so many different techniques and powers. She is intrigued and wonders what might have been the complexity of the restriction vow he imposed on himself to obtain all that strength. Meanwhile, one of Maestro's soldiers complains of pain in his arms for playing for so long, but the commander asks for just a bit more. He argues that Ryushin's defensive barrier is visibly weakening, which indicates that the enemy's energy is close to the end. In fact, the hero continues maintaining his static defensive posture, focusing most of his concentration on keeping the shield firm. Another musician suggests just blowing up the entire tower at once, but Maestro screams furious, forbidding that action in a quite drastic way. The conductor explains that they must focus on keeping the property damage as minor as possible, but is interrupted by a murmur of surprise. Suddenly, the smoke dissipates and reveals Neo floating in her complete combat form, with white hair and larger horns. Despite seeing the girl's transformation, the commander just lets out a confident laugh, full of disdain for the new threat. He concludes in a precise way that the bodyguard decided to focus all his combat capacity solely on maintaining his tactical defense, leaving the entire attack role and the offensive advance against the security group to the exclusive account of Neo's destructive power. The girl firms her feet and raises her gigantic sword in flames, invoking the powerful first form of her style. In an imposing pose and surrounded by an enormous fire whirlwind, she prepares to deliver a devastating blow against them. The commander accepts the challenge with open arms and screams with excitement for his orchestra to continue to play with full force. The young girl delivers her supreme fire strike against the adversaries, naming the destructive technique Mountain Shatterer. A colossal and violent explosion of red and purple energy collides head-on, intensely illuminating the entire combat scenario. Upon realizing the real impact of that colossal collision, Commander Maestro lets out a sharp scream of absolute panic and incredulity. He screams in complete desperation that the building's structure is under attack and cannot be destroyed, while the soldier asks him to focus. Suddenly, the Prota's cold and calm voice emerges from very close, making the elderly officer widen his eyes in pure shock. Ryushin leaps in the air in his direction and points his tactical cannon from up close, commenting in an ironic way that his performance turned into a mess. The commander realizes with hatred that the adversary was holding back before just to avoid damaging the building, and roars his name furious. The hero coldly declares that instead of worrying about the physical integrity of the criminal organization's tower structure, he delivers a devastating physical blow charged with electricity straight against the elderly commander's chest. In the middle of the air, Ryushin lands imposing over the defeated and fallen opponent, coldly advising him to worry only about himself from now on.